Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be discussing the stages of grief. But before we get into the video, remember to subscribe if you're not already subscribed to the channel. Click the like button. Turn on those notifications, so click the bell so you don't miss any time we upload or go live. And of course, be active in the comment section. Give me some questions, provide some comments, what have you. And if at any time you want to reach me one-on-one, look in the description box so you can reach me on other social media platforms or send me an email. Now let's get into this video. So before we get into the stages of grief, let's once again define what is grief. Here's my definition of grief. Grief is a natural, strong, acute, emotional feeling following a loss. Now that loss can stem from the loss of a loved one, the loss of a relationship, the loss of your own independence through a disability, or facing your own loss of life or mortality by being diagnosed with a terminal illness. It could also be from an inanimate object, such as you lost your grandmother's prized jewelry or your wedding ring. And it also can be from pets. The degree of our grief is determined by our loss. There are 5 stages of grief that are widely accepted, but in reality, there may be over 12 stages that a person transcends after a loss. This video will address these stages, and if they're really 5, 6, 7, 12, or even more, or whether or not they're just interchangeable words or synonyms of the same. The 5 stages of grief is more of a easy to remember blueprint that helps us understand the grieving process. It's not perfect or a complete comprehensive formulation, but it is widely accepted because it is incredibly popular and very persuasive because it effectively teaches us the experience of grief. Changes over time. It looks different for each person, yet it will bear identical similarities to the experience of others who have lost a loved one. So let's get into these stages. Now, those 5 stages, they are generally written in a certain order. However, we know that not everyone will experience all 5 stages. We also know that everyone won't experience the stages in the exact order. And we also are aware that even when you come out of one stage, you may still revert back to the previous stage. And sometimes you may experience both stages at the same time. So, if we remember, grief will hit us in stages. It comes and it goes. As I stated before, it'll jump from stage to stage, only to revisit something we thought we had already worked through or worked out. And then we're back in that previous stage. Working through grief is very hard. Possibly, as I've stated in other videos, possibly the hardest thing that you will experience in this life. And there is no set timetable. It's a personal journey. It must be traveled at your own pace. Yet it is also a universal journey. That is not to take out of context what I'm saying when I say it's not a set timetable as far as you can grieve forever. No. You can have symptoms of grief and possibly will for the rest of your life. But there is most definitely a right way to grieve. Even though you go back and forth and experience these different stages. And there is most definitely a timetable to say, hey, the natural process of grieving should have occurred within this time frame. You're way out of the window. So generally, after a year, we can almost assume that you're probably not grieving well. And even if we don't know you and we listen to your story, we can probably pinpoint that possibly at the 6 month to 1 year period, you are definitely having issues and struggling with your grief process. So without further ado, let's move into these 5 stages. Now remember, these 5 stations are not all-encompassing of all the emotions that you will feel. As we go through these 5 stages, I'm going to also incorporate the 6, 7, and 12 stages of grief that have also been placed out, and see if they are just extensions of these 5 stages or if they're actually additional stages that the person goes through. So first you have denial. Denial has also been used with shock, disbelief. So in the denial phase, we're looking at you first hear that a loved one is passed, or you first get the news of, hey, your spouse wants to divorce you, or you're in the relationship, or you've been told that you have a terminal illness, and or that you're developing an illness that is incurable, and while it won't be fatal, you'll lose your independence, such as Parkinson's disease, or you lose a pet. Whether this is an acute process or not, it hits you out of the blue, and generally the first thing we have is denial. So we say, this is not true, I don't believe it. We start fantasizing and saying, oh, I'm going to wake up from this and it won't be true. This is, a mistake. You have the wrong person. So those are the feelings of denial. And you're shocked also if you hear that certain person has died. You may be in denial about it, but you'll also be shocked and you don't believe any of the information that you are receiving. So that is the first stage. And remember, you don't necessarily have to experience denial, and everyone won't. But this is how it was ordered by Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who established this grief model in 1969. Now, one other thing I want to address about the denial stage is this. It's not just about the person saying, I can't believe this is happening to me, or I'm going to wake up. Denial also goes so far as to the person will tell other people that they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. Yet we know, no, you got a diagnosis of this and that, and we know that it's very real, but yet they go as far as to pretend it doesn't happen. Next stage is anger. Now, the anger stage is when you have realized that, yes, my loved one is gone, my relationship is over, I've been diagnosed with this illness, I've lost my pet, I've lost my grandmother's ring, and now you're upset about it, you're no longer in denial, and you're going to fight the situation. You become angered at the diagnosis, the people around you, the doctors, the nurses, the techs, the bed rail, and you take your anger out on your loved ones that is ill. So you'll say, for example, if your loved one has been diagnosed with cancer, why didn't you take better care of yourself? You start getting angry at, anything, your the car, the cat, everybody and everything will make you angry. How did this happen? How did you allow this to happen? You may even become angry at yourself, which makes you even more angry, right? If you're diagnosed with something and you're going through that type of loss, woe is me, this is unfair. How could this happen to me? So anger is the next step. While none of us like it, especially when we are the receiving end of this of your loved ones taking things out on you, but it's a very necessary step that you go through the healing process. So it is very good for them to be in this angry process, in this angry state, because we know they're going through the natural state of healing. They're angry at you, they're angry at the bar, they're angry at the chair, they're angry at God, they're angry at themselves. But it's very necessary. This is stage 2. The third stage is bargaining. Now, you've left the anger stage, and now you want to bargain. Most of the time, we're bargaining with our higher power or God. And we say, God, if you just take it away and let it be a mistake, I'll be a better person. I'll do this, I'll do that. The irony of that is the things that you're generally bargaining that you were going to do, you're not going to do because you didn't do them when you had the chance. But you're bargaining with God that if he takes this away, you'll actually be able to go through and do those things that you were not able to do prior to the diagnosis. You may ask God for more time still. You may ask him for healing, and you may ask God, pray that the doctor gave you the wrong diagnosis, and that when you go back, he's going to tell you, oh, he or she made a mistake. People also will try to bargain with the health professionals. And how does that look? Basically, when you're bargaining with health professionals, you're saying, hey, well, why don't you try this treatment? Why don't you do one more operation? Why don't you order one more test? Why don't you order this test? Why don't you try something that is still in testing and hasn't been proven to work or anything like that? You start to look for alternative methods and go to naturopaths and homeopaths and alternative forms of medicine and so on. These are all forms of bargaining. After you leave the bargaining stage, stage 3, you go into your 4th stage. This is the depression stage of grief, not to be confused with depression, the mental illness. Depression stage also can be called the despair stage, the loneliness stage, the bewilderment stage, the reflection stage. These are the other stages that were provided from stages 6, stage 7, the 6 stages of, 7 stages of, or the 12 stages of. I just feel like these are all synonyms of the same thing that you would feel in this type of depression, because it's not a mental health diagnosis. It's just an intense sadness due to a loss. Now, when we speak of the depression stage, as I said, it's not the mental health. It's more coming from a reflection or a loneliness. Not that you feel lonely or anything like that, but what you tend to do is while you're doing your reflection, you tend to isolate yourself. you may not go out with your friends or to functions with your family as you used to. You know, you may still go, but then there are times you just say, I want to be by myself. You experience despair. Not necessarily woe is me, but more of a reflection. You have a sadness, but that sadness is being used to reflect on what is going on, and it is a process of healing that you're going through this depressive state. Remember, everyone doesn't go through this, and it may not be the fourth stage for you. This is more of a hopeless feeling of not wanting to go on. It is not complicated grief. It's just you're just feeling, I throw my hands up, now what do I do? You're just feeling a sadness of, maybe I should give up. Why am I here? You're kind of questioning everything. The depression stage may also find you turning inward and refusing to communicate with the outside world. You know, you may become overwhelmed and you start feeling hostile towards anyone that, you know, is close to you or in your circle or your family members. Of course, you know, we hurt the ones that are closest to us. And so you start to not want to be around them and kind of associate with them while you're going through this sadness, you know, this sadness, but also I'm bewildered, you know, but you're also reflecting on your diagnosis. The next and final stage is acceptance. In the other stages, they also call this the reconstructive and working stage, the upward turn, working through stage, the hope stage. Now, this is where you accept the fact that your loved one, or perhaps yourself, is going to die. You accept that your loved one passed. You realize that the relationship is over. Your pet is gone. You realize that you have lost that ring of your grandmother's forever. And you accept the fact that there is nothing you can do to stop the process of dying, or you can't find that ring again. You can't undiagnose this situation. You can't bring your loved one back. You realize the doctor gave me the right diagnosis from the start. If you get to this stage and your loved one has already passed, your pet has already passed, like I said, if you lose your jewelry, whatever, it is a form of coming to terms with your new reality of not having your loved one with you on this side of the earth. You no longer have this ring. You're no longer in this relationship. Okay? The grief and the pain is very much still there. And they may come back, as we said, from other stages from time to time. But internally, you have come to terms with your loss. When you reach this fifth stage of grief, you start to plan on how you will move on with your life. It may take the form of, you know, hey, I'm going to go on a vacation. Or, you know, I'm going to go and buy me some new jewelry. Or I'm going to start dating again. Or I'm going to now go out and get me a new pet. Or, you know, whatever your loss is. But you start to do things to help you begin to heal from your grief and misery in the future. Now, there are 2 additional stages that have been added. One, I wanted to agree with and say, instead of 5 stages, I see them as 6. But Dr. Kubler-Ross actually added 2 stages to her initial 5, and she added shock or disbelief and guilt. Now, I'm going to go through with why she added it, but remember, I felt like shock or disbelief was denial, that it fit perfectly in that. But the 6th one I would add would definitely be guilt. I think that is a very real stage that some of us go through. So if we look at the added stage of shock and disbelief, what we understand is, even though I've listed it as stage 6, it would actually go as stage 1 in this model. By adding that, Dr. Kubler-Ross is saying we first will have shock and disbelief at the loss of our loved one, the loss of the relationship, the diagnosis, the loss of a pet. Even if we know that our loved one is dying, we know that we're sick, we know that the relationship has run its course, we still have shock and disbelief that it actually happened. Now, I still kind of feel like this could be a form of denial, but I do understand the rationale. Sometimes, for example, in the death of a loved one, we will go through the entire funeral process or ritual and be in shock and disbelief the entire time. And then later on, we'll go into, all right, denial, as did this really happen, and questioning, if this was real or if our loved one's going to walk through the door, things of that nature. So I do understand the shock and the disbelief. Stage 7 that was added was guilt. This, in the formula, would actually go after the bargaining stage. We start to feel guilt. Guilt shows up very much so in the way of an estranged relationship. So if one of our loved ones died and we didn't talk to them anymore, we were angry with them, or we were upset, and the death was an unresolved death, as far as we didn't resolve our relationship back to good standing, then you have guilt. You also have guilt as far as survivor's guilt or survivor's remorse, where there may have been an accident and you're the only survivor. This is even more heavier if you were possibly driving a car that crashed and killed everyone, or if you feel like you were, left a candle burning and the house burned down and you were the only one that got out. Just as you have survivor's guilt from the loss of a loved one, you could also have survivor's guilt from a relationship. You are guilty and you kind of blame yourself that, maybe you could have done something different. What have you done to ruin your marriage or your relationship? So there's lots of guilt in different situations when it comes to loss. Another problem that you have is with guilt, there's a feeling of missed opportunity. So if your marriage broke down before you had children, so there's a missed opportunity that you will be going through as, I thought we were going to plan a family together, we were going to go on vacation, we were going to do all these things. Just as when your loved one dies, there's missed opportunities for the future. You won't be able to do this, your loved one may not able to be at your wedding. They won't see your first child. They won't be able to help you through your first heartbreak. There's so many missed opportunities that fall under guilt. And remember, guilt is also, just as all of these stages, just a manifestation of a healing process we're going through, and we're feeling such a strong, emotional, overwhelming pain. It is always very important, as I've stated before, to go through each of these stages, whichever stage you're in, to the fullest, and sit in your pain. That is the way you're going to heal from your grief. Grief is not something that we get over. It is not something we aim to get over. We aim to get through and we heal from it. That does not say that you won't experience sadness and sorrow from time to time. But when you think of your loved one, or you think of whatever loss you suffered, you're able to smile and think of the good times and the happy times. And you're not just surviving, you're thriving. You have adjusted to a new way of life. And even though you don't have that physical relationship, that physical person, pet, what have you, with you, you're able to make them a part of your life on a more spiritual realm. Thank you for watching. I hope this video helps. Please feel free to reach out if you are having difficulty with your grief. You can reach us through contact information in the description box.